Good evening, everyone. Thanks for turning out. Thanks for having us. My name is Marlon Siebert, and I'm joined here with my two colleagues, John Osbury and Austin Epps. We'd like to tell you a little bit about how we, as part of a bigger team, managed to contact Space Probe that was launched almost 36 years ago. And the adventure that was. So, the actual Space Probe is acronym. It's ISEE-3. It was launched as one of 3 probes, and the Reboot project is the sort of name that the team goes by that's contacting the Space Probe. And so, guys, do you want to introduce yourselves quickly? By the way, I like software-defined radio. Who's heard of software-defined radio? Look at that! Wow, cool. That's really neat. So I work at Edis Research. That's where I met John. Used to work there, so a bit of an SDR guru, and I met Austin as part of the project. Do you guys want to quickly introduce yourselves?
Sure. Pretty quick. My name's John Osbury, as Ron said. I used to work at Edis Research. Unfortunately, I was a marketing guy at that time, but I had recently departed, and this was a great project to get involved and prove that I could be more than just a marketing guy. So it's like I don't always write code, but when I do, it talks to the space probe. It's been a great opportunity since Edis Research. I recently joined the team at a company called and they're in the business of building CubeSats and lots of them and using them to gather various types of data. So, small plug, we are hiring if anybody's interested. Feel free to reach out to me after.
Hi, I'm Austin Epps. My background is in aerospace engineering, so these guys know about more than I know about the specifics of RF, but as far as the operation of spacecraft and that sort of thing. So I have some experience with working with old NASA data. I was on the Lunar Orbiter Recovery Project, which is ongoing. We have all of the data from the 1966 and 1967 mission series Lunar Orbiter, which was 5 missions in the 1960s to map the surface of the moon, and Richard talks about that with from the original magnetic tape, and that's how I got involved.
Their office is an old McDonald's that they've converted to a place called McMoon's, and I believe that you fly a pirate flag in the window, right? And it's actually quite incredible. I wish I would have had a photo here. You go in, and it seems so recognizable because it's a replicated layout of every single magnet. When you go in, and that's where you normally order your food, but it's all got computer equipment on it, stacks of tapes.
Right, so it's the McDonald's at Moffett Field, which is when the Navy left, it became NASA Research was already there. So NASA took over the operation of the entire thing. So we're in a NASA building which used to be in the old McDonald's, and we've been there for 6 years now.
All right, so let's get down to it then. This is an artist rendering of the Space Probe. It was, where are you going, guys? I'm going to throw it back to you. International Sun Earth Explorer #3, and it was launched a little while ago. It had a phase where it went through a heliocentric orbit. I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. And its primary aim is to study the interaction between the solar wind and Earth's magnetic field. You can see that it has all these sort of arms coming out, various antennas and so forth. It was renamed to ICE, so we sort of interchangeably refer to it by both. And it was first did a couple of different things. First spacecraft in the halo orbit at an Earth-Sun L1 point, and I'll explain what that is. And it was also the first spacecraft to pass through the tail of a comet. So it's seen some interesting things. So this is what the Lagrange points are called. This was physically was L1, so this is the Sun and this is the Earth. Then this is a special point in the orbit where, as the Earth orbits the Sun, the space probe would actually follow with it. Would you agree, rocket scientists? Is that I'm just a radio guy. So if you were to sort of render that out, you can have the Sun and the Earth, and you can see these various dates for different points at which the space probe was. And the incredible thing about this, apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one guy was able to visualize this entire thing in his head, and then tell NASA this is what you need to do various burns, this is where you need to have it, so it'll end up here in 30 years. And he mapped it out all these things with like saw in multiple dimensions. It's pretty incredible. But this is sort of the L1 point we were hanging out for a while in that narrow orbit. So if I quickly switch over to a web browser, then this is an animation of the perhaps if I put it on the actual. So you can see here, this is the sun, this is the inertial reference frame, and then the space probe is right there. If you follow the mouse, it's just about to catch up with the Earth. You see, that's what's actually happening right now. So we're at the point where it's just come around, and it's about to catch up with the Earth. It's actually really close now. We've been talking to it right there. And so we want to capture it now before it's too late, because if we miss that, then how many more years is it going to be until we see it again?
Depends on how close the fast is to the Earth, but at least we can.
Okay. So that's why there's a bit of a sense of urgency here. So, alright. So this is an example of a particular projection of the orbits of the Earth and the space probe. You can't actually see it because Ultramon has done something weird on the internet. But if you look closely, this spiral sort of orbit is the space probe, and you can see that comet that it happened to intersect with at a particular point in time. So it's amazing they were able to plan out the orbit in advance like this and have it work. And this is a curious frame because unlike the inertial reference frame which is looked at before, this is sort of drawn by having the Earth statically centered at the plot at the bottom and then the sun is off to the left. So you kind of have to imagine this entire reference frame moving as the Earth orbits the sun. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But if you were to zoom out, this is the inertial frame.
This is a rotating frame.
Do you want to explain that? I'll pull up the video in the meantime.
So this is just a way to visualize it with, there's a fixed Earth sun line, which is that dash line that you see across the screen. And so if you leave that line and basically, imagine that you're looking down on the top of the solar system, and here's the Earth and here's the sun, and you're rotating around. It's like your camera view is rotating with that line. This is what you actually see. The reason that you get these curly cues is due to the relative eccentricities of the Earth's orbit and the orbital spacecraft. So this animation is in the same reference frame. This is from the original trajectory of the spacecraft was sent on in 1988. And here it is orbiting the Earth's southern launch point, L1. It's about a 6-month orbit, and the reason that they did that was because if you sit a spacecraft at L1, it's really hard to communicate with it because you're pointing your antenna at the sun. The sun has a lot of radio noise. So they have it in this 6-month halo orbit. And basically the reason that they did this comet mission was because in preparation for the Halley's Comet pass in 1986, the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, and the Soviet Union all had missions to go near Halley's Comet, and the U.S. didn't. And no one had ever actually visited the comet before, so Robert Farquhar and some people at NASA decided to take ISEE-3, which had been a solar physics element. They first sent it into the Earth's geomagnetic tail. And what they're doing here is a series of deliberate flybys. They're actually stealing a little bit of energy each time it passes by the moon. And they did a series of 5 of these flybys. And as you see it, it's going to do one or two more slow passes. And then it will do a very extreme pass where it gets absolutely launched out into heliocentric orbit. And it ended up in an orbit that was about a 355-day orbit. So that's why it took about 33 years for it to catch up back to Earth. So here we go. That's research done by Mike Louds. He did the recent, he and his company did the recent NASA lunar mission LADEE, which was a NASA Ames mission, and it was a lunar atmospheric and dust exploring environment explorer. There you go. Thank you. Thanks. They had a lot of experience doing non-traditional orbits. LADEE used some very interesting tricks by virtue of having been launched on a 5-stage solid rocket, which is you don't have a lot of certainty in what orbit we're going to do. They did a lot of cool things. Anyway, back to Paul.
Thanks, Austin. Rocket scientist. All right, so this is another view of the space probe here. It has some interesting attributes. One is that it actually is constantly spinning. It's not like it's fixed in space. It's spin stabilized at this sort of odd revolutions per minute. In addition, you can see here that the thrusters have been shown their positions on the actual space probe. So you've got spin and de-spin thrusters, and the maneuver that we're actually going to do, hopefully quite soon, is to restore the spin speed to its nominal value, because it's slightly slow. In addition, you've got these radial thrusters if you want to do some sort of maneuver, like we would like to at some point in the very near future, to change its trajectory and put it into hopefully a higher orbit around the Earth. The other cool thing is that you have the antennas here. They are acid band antennas, so we're communicating within the 2 GHz region. And then if you look at the total radial length, it's actually 92 meters from tip to tip. So from that respect, you have some really fast moving parts as it spins. It actually has a lot of experiments on board. It's actually jam-packed with them. And so this is part of the approach with trying to get these experiments back up and running and see if we can collect some more data, so you can sort of get a sense of all different sort of energy, protons, waves, cosmic rays, and so on that it sampled in the past. This is an example of the old telemetry screen, apparently that NASA had to receive telemetry and how they were printing these things out. Remember this, because I lost a lot of sleep over the past week recreating our new version, so I'll show you that in a minute. So what happened was, the original mission drew to close, they turned off telemetry, only the transponders were left on, which means there's just a carrier signal coming down from the satellite. NASA decommissioned the ground-based equipment, so what it means is that their deep space network, which is based around the world, Goldstone, Madrid, Canberra, is actually incapable of sending commands to the space probe anymore. The equipment doesn't exist. And documentation has been scattered, and Austin can certainly attest to this, that there is so much documentation spread out everywhere, and some of it's actually quite contradictory, so we had to do some testing on the fly, but it was, what do you call it, dumpster diving NASA documentation? So the new mission, our fearless leader is named Dennis Wingo. He's working with Keith Cowie and trying to recapture the space probe, get some telemetry, fire the thrusters, and bring it into a stable new orbit around the Earth. And then the grand aim is to allow open public access to the remaining scientific capabilities, so using it for STEM studies and so on. So that's actually kind of cool. And this got a little bit of news coverage about NASA signing the agreement with sort of the group in allowing us to communicate with the space probe. So that was a big milestone. So the reason why I was a sense of urgency is because as it draws closer to the Earth, you can see here along the bottom is the date, and then the range of astronomical units as it closes in, and this is obviously where we are now. We have a limited amount of fuel that's left on the space probe, and what this is called is your amount of delta V, so the amount of change you can apply in the trajectory. And so, depending on, we have a fixed amount of fuel left, so depending on where it is relative to us, as the days progress, you will need more and more fuel to try and create the same maneuver. And then obviously once you exhaust this is percentage of delta V capacity, so think about this as the amount of fuel that's required to do the trajectory correction. This is actually old. This is very conservative, so the numbers are better than this. But beyond this date, which is a little bit further out now, you would need more fuel than is available on the Earth. So, Austin, do you want to quickly talk about this one? So this is the success case and the failure case that we will find out.
So, officially the plan is to go back to L1. That's what we're being supported by NASA, that's the current plan. There might be some reasons that going back to the L1 orbit aren't going to be as feasible longer term. Mostly due to cost. You just have to do a lot of maneuvering to stay in that L1 orbit because it's not a stable orbit. Whereas there are orbits around the Earth that are fairly high, or even around the Moon, that we could get into with the amount of fuel that's left in the spacecraft, but don't require this constant maintenance. You have to keep ranging the spacecraft to stay in L1 and then doing maneuvers. I think during the operational mission, they were ranging several times a week and doing a maneuver like every couple of weeks, just to tweak the path to stay within this boundary, to actually stay in the L1 orbit. So anyway, going back to the slide, we're going to be experiencing a flyby of the, yeah, there you go. So this is the Moon's orbit, the dark black line. We're going to be experiencing a flyby of the Moon on August this year.
So watch closely, because if we screw up, there's going to be a bit of an explosion. No, there's not.
So we basically need to do what they did in the early 1980s, but in reverse, where we need to do a flyby of the Moon, but instead of stealing energy from the Moon needs to steal some energy from the satellite and reduce its energy to the point where we can capture it into an Earth orbit. And you have to do, obviously, another thruster firing after the initial flyby, because due to orbital dynamics. So
this is if it works?
Yeah, this is if it works. And if it doesn't work, it will basically fly by the Moon. It may actually go into a quasi-stable orbit, and we think maybe now we're getting better data all the time. But ultimately, if you don't, you'll burn. It's going to. It's not going to stay in Earth because it's going to get kicked back out, and it's going to be at least 15 years before it comes back.
So, therefore, the mission was born, and they used Rocket Hub to raise funds. This is all crowdfunded. That was a nice little amount they put together. So the problem remained that NASA jumped all of their equipment, and of course, the only way to communicate with the space program is using RF radio waves. So since it wasn't available, we needed to create a new modulator and a demodulator so that the spacecraft could understand commands and we would try and send it, but that we also could understand the telemetry that was coming down, turning it from RF into ones and zeros that we could then parse and display on a screen to actually figure out what state the space probe was in. So this is where software-defined radio comes in. Just kind of save the day. They happened to get in touch with the guy that founded Edis Research, Matt Edis, and they got in touch with John, and then John and I sort of came on board. John, do you want to talk about that first experience with them? So they ended up ordering some research from us. This is the network device you plug it in over a gigabit Ethernet connection to your network, and we've got a couple of these at Arecibo, another one on the East Coast. And this is sort of what we have hooked up to GNU Radio and the open source software that we use to communicate with. Okay. So we have quite a long distance. These numbers were computed initially at Arecibo. So at the time it was a fair distance away. The spacecraft sending back RF only has a 5-watt transmitter, so it needs considerable gain on the dish. There are 2 transponders on the board, transponders A and B, 2 antennas, medium and gain ones. And so basically it comes down to number average link budget, considering we don't have access, NASA doesn't have the capabilities, we don't have access to their dishes. So one little thing I put together was this little prediction script. JPL, NASA JPL has this Horizon service where you can add your observer point, the date, what object you're trying to track and so on. It will calculate all of the relevant details. There was some initial analysis by this aerospace company when they detected the carrier about 2008, I think. And so they updated what's called the ephemeris, which defines the orbit. And so that's what we've been working with. But sometimes it's not that accurate, and so you need to search the sky with your dish. So what it looks like then, I'll show you this running in real time afterward, but once it reads in the data, you set what time it was running in real time. What time tells you the speed, so the space probe was moving at 3.4 kilometers per second toward this general direction. It was quite a ways away from the Earth at the time. And this is the interesting thing. Usually when you're talking about satellite radio and terrestrial communications, you're talking about sending some waves out and they get to the destination immediately. Here, the two-way light time, so this is the time that it would take for us to transmit something, the space probe to act on it, and then modify the telemetry that would be coming back on the signal, would in this case be 103 seconds. So we send something out, switch to receive, and then kind of wait and pray. In addition, there are some frequencies here at the downlink, and because you are traveling very quickly, and the Earth is rotating as well, you have to take into account the Doppler shifts. So if you want to hit the space probe at the right frequency by the time the signal arrives at the space probe, you have to be on the mark. And this little script constantly updates the Doppler shift. So what do you need for long distance communications? A big amplifier and a big ass dish. Here's a big dish. Happens to be the world's largest. This is it at Arecibo, Puerto Rico. And we were fortunate enough to be able to go there and set up the initial stuff. So this is from the view of the control center. This is the catwalk. You might remember some films that were actually shot here, some certain scenes. A bit of action happening from the catwalk. And the dome was installed. This is a more recent addition in the life of the dish. And this is actually where all the transmission and reception happens. This is Austin, John and I, further up. There's a smaller dish. This is looking back down. One of the guys there, Dana Whitlow, he's an absolute champ. He's a microwave RF guru. He took us around remotely. This is actually on a platform, so on multiple occasions we went up using the cable car or the catwalk, and this is sort of looking down from the dome. It's a bit of a ways down. They're installing these new iris ray heaters to do experiments with the atmosphere. This is the view on top of the catwalk. You would get on there and walk across, and to actually access the dome, you walk down these steps. Go through the rotary joint here, go down some more steps. I mean, the scale of the place is just incredible when you get there. I put my GoPro on my hard hat and walked around, so if you have an hour to spare, you can watch the full uncut deal. But I mean, the scale is just, it's mind-boggling. It's no wonder that you can capture these sort of weak signals. If you think about it, these are photons, and the bigger your umbrella, the more you can capture. So that's Dana, who was taking us on a bit of a tour. That's Dennis there. This is actually on the transmitter floor, I believe. This is under that azimuth arm. So that arm that the dome will track across as it tracks an object through the sky, that whole thing is sort of suspended there. So it's pretty amazing the entire thing can be supported by the three coins around the outside. This is actually looking up. Here's the cable car going up. It goes all the way up to the top of the structure there. And this is sort of the bottom looking up into the dome. So they have the secondary and tertiary reflectors in there, and then it gets focused to a point where they position the feed for the transmitter or the receiver. These are those reflectors inside that dome structure. And these are the feeds, the horns that are actually underneath the receiver floor. So you can see that they have these sort of apertures here. This is where the photons get focused. And so they go in there or they're emitted. And it's actually quite a cool setup because the focus of the entire dish is always at a fixed point. This entire floor rotates. So back in the control center, they type some commands to select the appropriate receiver and transmitter. The entire thing turns and positions it exactly where it should be. So it's an amazing setup. This is in the control center, John and I. They have the operator that sits there with all these screens. It tells you what the current position of the dome is, where the azimuth arm is. They have tie downs, which are these enormous concrete blocks underneath the dish itself that keep the platform level, because depending on the temperature, there's a difference in the tension of the wires. So let's just keep everything calibrated. This is the tie-down status here, and weather and tracking information. This is actually CCTV in the dome. Oh look, there's Austin giving the thumbs up. One of the guys here was installing some electronics. This is actually what the receiver looks like. So this entire floor rotates. So RFI is a really big deal here. There are signs everywhere to turn your phone off. And amazingly, did they say that the ignition cables on the cars that go in there are actually shielded as well? Yeah, the coax ignition cables, which is pretty crazy. This is what underneath the dome looks like. So you can actually go down a road, and if something needs to be hoisted up, which we didn't do, you can access it that way. This is Victor, and it looks incredible because there's all this lush vegetation. That's an incredible structure over here. Actually, one little anecdote here is that we were on a said, you have to wear your yellow hard hat all the time. And the funny thing about it is that when you're underneath the dish, you have to wear the hard hat in case like a little nut or a bolt or something falls off the platform, which can happen from time to time. Because if you look at the dish, there are like holes in it, and some of them get patched over. But the thing is, once a nut or a bolt has fallen down and it's already accelerated to that considerable velocity, it doesn't matter whether you have a hard hat on. Phil said basically, if it hits your hard hat, it's going to break it and you're going to die. You're not wearing a hard hat, it will just penetrate the skull and you're going to die. So don't have much luck. So additionally, apart from receiving, you also transmit. So they have a setup for S-band radar. They actually use it as a radar to image asteroids. So here's an example of this sort of image that they can recreate from the returns. And the dish gain, if you think about it, is quite incredible. It's in that value, which is phenomenally huge. And the beam is very, very narrow when it comes out. So this is actually one of the klystrons in the dome. They pull the receivers down to about 35 to 40 Kelvin, which means that you reduce the noise. They have two 1 megawatt klystrons sitting there that they power combine. And unfortunately, we couldn't use this setup because it was slightly outside the frequency that we need to operate at. But this is some pretty serious equipment. By the time you apply the gain, you're actually outputting 20 terawatts effective radiating power. So it's quite incredible. And now, we didn't see it, unfortunately, we would have loved to, but when birds fly through this beam, apparently, in order, here we go, they're boiled. It's an S-band, right? It's like a microwave. They fall onto the dish because they're dead. They catch fire for the enormous amount of energy. And the problem with that is, beyond that, it reflects a lot of the RF energy back up into the dome, which is bad because these receivers are so incredibly sensitive. Usually there's actually a shutter that closes over the receivers, but still they're very sensitive, so it's going to be bad. Bad for the receiver, bad for the... Now, so we needed our own amplifier, and this amazing hand-built custom amplifiers in Germany, Dirk Fischer, he put together a new amp for us that does up to 450 watts. And the guys at Arecibo were amazing, and they actually managed to sort of hook it to their existing setup. And we used the existing S-band feed. So this is what it looks like. Who remembers the film Primer? It was that sort of indie film. Don't you reckon that looks like a box? It looks a lot like a box. Anyway, so here it is actually being hoisted up into the dome. So it gets put in this little bucket and gets taken all the way up there. And then they pull it in and set it up. There it goes. So we have about 2.5, 2.75 hours each day where we can observe the space probe. This is actually, Arecibo is really busy with the schedule and it's jam-packed, so we're fortunate enough for them to allow us on 7 days to use that period in the afternoon. The window creeps 2 minutes earlier every day, and because you can only transmit or receive once, you basically do one in the other or then switch back, and it takes a little bit of time to do. So what we've done is we have some USRPs hooked up to their existing RF infrastructure. It's running a new radio with it, and you can actually see the space probes carry signal right there. This is their big patch panel where they have all their RF coming through. You can hook this up in different configurations and do different things. To decode that, you kind of need to decode this schematic. So that was interesting. They have a hydrogen maser as a station reference for timekeeping, which is incredibly accurate clock, and we managed to patch with that. And I'll skip that, but it's on photographs. This is the very first time we kind of saw the space carrier. That was pretty exciting, and we were sort of studying that to figure out what was happening. I'll skip that, but Phil Paralab is one of the gurus that he lives and breathes the station. He's American, he moved there, went surfing, and then he got it in, and he does this every day. He's an amazing guy. He ran this sort of spider search to try and narrow in and update the ephemera so we knew where we were pointing. And we were happy. That was all good. The bird was there, and it was all happy to make that confirmation because we saw that carrier on our little waterfall there. So this is sort of blown up. This is the very weak carrier on the very first day that we found it. And if you look at the entire spectrum, it's just this incredibly faint red line there. If you do the FFT and zoom in, it's just a tiny little slice of it, just above the waterfall. Once you actually get the pointing right, though, it's great because you have this incredible boost in the signal. So this is actually a really strong signal, which is what we expected from Arecibo. And so that's like 40, 50 dB above the noise floor. So that's great. We're really, really happy there. What date was this? This was like, this is the 23rd or something like that?
Yeah. Pretty week.
Yeah. And so you can look at that on the waterfall. This is all like new radio, open source, DSP, SDR framework. If you zoom right in, you get a really, really, really fine spectral resolution. You see how it's sort of moving back and forth? This is actually the Doppler that's induced by the spinning of the space program. So you can actually determine the spin rate from looking at this carrier alone instead of looking at the telemetry. So with there, we had some people filming and stuff, and got a bit of coverage, which was kind of cool. So we received, we want to communicate with them, we want to transmit back out again. So we set up the second USER, and what happens is this USER actually transmits the modulated baseband data at S-band at about 2 gigahertz. And this blew my mind, I didn't realize this sort of stuff existed. The RF output, the analog RF output, goes into this box, and it puts it onto a fiber optic cable. Usually you think about digital modulation and stuff going on fiber optic cable. This is 12 gigahertz of bandwidth going off a single mode fiber all the way up to the dome, because they have all these speeds and stuff going on. And in the dome it comes back out as RF and then comes up to the amplifier and send it out. So here we're just calibrating some levels. This is one of their equipment rooms, so we have it just set up in the rack there. So they were incredibly accommodating. Now, John, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
So part of that we skipped over before is kind of introducing software-defined radio and why it's so cool. I think this project was just a perfect example. At first, the ISEE-3 Reboot project, they kind of went to some of the experts at NASA and said, hey, there's this opportunity coming up to do this maneuver. Can you help us? Can you help us get that communications equipment, or can you help us recreate it? And the answer that came out was no. It would cost millions of dollars and it would be very difficult. But they came to this research. It was exciting for me because I'm all about aerospace. I love it. And I looked at it, and it just seemed like a little bit of a... it looked like a slam dunk. And that's not because I'm super smart or I really know this stuff. It's that software-defined radio, Edis Research, Junior Radio, it's kind of developed this ecosystem, this community around it. So that stuff like this actually takes a half a day, and that's literally how long this took. So all this neat stuff that's in a straight line and kind of organized over here, that's my part. I can kind of talk through the details of how that works, but it's some interesting modulation where it has both the data and carrier, so the receiver on the spacecraft can be super simple and not have to recover the block. And then all the stuff over here, I was making a block. That's his stuff where all the blocks are kind of mashed together. But essentially, I don't have a pointer. Effectively, what happens is, there's this one here. Well, anyway, you start at the left side, and there's a socket interface that takes some data from the application that sends the commands, and it goes through these non-kinetic processes that's built up graphically here in Python, and it comes out as an RF signal out of this USRP device that we've talked about. And this is kind of, once you put all the bits through and do all the math, this is what it looks like in the frequency domain. It's pretty non-stable modulation that you don't see too often. But the other part of this, as Colin and Austin alluded to, is there were just hundreds of documents from NASA talking about how the space probe worked, how long, or how the planes work as well. And it's amazing how many of them said something completely contradictory and different. So there are a lot of ambiguities, and only small contracting does it ever seem to try it. So what we did is we did a kind of automated script where we looked at all the different possibilities of how the modulation is put together, and we kind of tried everything. And then we stepped across a wide frequency range in case there is an offset on the spacecraft itself. And it turned out pretty well. It was super exciting. We sent this command up and we actually saw a response. It's been well over a decade since we can talk to the spacecraft, well over a decade since those circuits have been stimulated. So that was pretty awesome. Oh, and then you guys use this photograph like this.
Thanks. So John made this amazing script that would sweep, and we've been using that every day, just to verify that it was transmitting the right stuff out, because of course we want everything to work. I put this together, which is sort of the equivalent of the spacecraft's receiver. So this is what the spacecraft will kind of see as we send up commands. This is in frequency domain. This is looking at it because it's phase modulated. It has various components to it that sort of give you clock and data, and this was just looking that you got the right bits coming up that were originally sent up. The telemetry is really interesting because it's convolutionally encoded, which means that because it's coming across an incredible distance, it will be very weak, and there are potential for errors to creep into your data stream. And those ones and zeros can be flipped, and of course then you might have data that's corrupt once you actually receive it on the ground. And it's actually using this thing called convolutional code, but it has this neat property that you can skip the really, really expensive decoding and look at it quickly. And that's the original paper. This was when we were doing the uplink. And this was kind of cool here, because this is spitting out the offsets that it was trying to send the command at. So as John was saying, it was trying all different combinations. But to make sure that the signal was actually getting out of the ditch and going onto the spacecraft, because as we found out, there are lots of other things that can go wrong. This is another little software-defined radio that I have here with just an antenna. So I've just got it receiving there, listening for the things coming out of the dish. And what do you know? The modulated command is appearing there. So it's a confirmation that everything is working, which is good. This is the moment where we actually sent the command and the telemetry was turned back on. So instead of having that little lonely carrier, we saw these side bands come up. And it was an amazing moment. Woo! That really has to be shared with all the guys because there was a huge amount of research and effort that went into it. So we celebrated. John unfortunately couldn't make it, so we joined together using, what's that, not FaceTime, what's that thing called? Hangout. So we were hanging out. And Nick Bisterman Foster, where is he? There he is, Nick, another total SDR guru down there. He managed to join him too. So it was a good time. So that's what it looks like instead of being that little line, what it looks like when it's actually modulated. So there's actually ones and zeros flowing over there. I'll skip all that. So we managed to transmit to transponder A and return it back on B because one can control the other. And then, so this is actually telemetry coming down on both. We had two radios receiving simultaneously. This was the GNU radio flow graph that's used to actually decode that telemetry stream. It tracks the carrier, and then it phase demodulates it, so you have your zeros and ones there, and you have your raw binary data stream there. You can slice that, you can check that the rate at which it's coming down is what you expect, and then you find the synchronization point within a frame of data. The legend Phil Kahn actually contributed to the project by writing this amazing Viterbi decoder, and he claims the world record for the longest constraint length, which is pretty cool. So this was some received telemetry. His decoder would decode it, Austin would have a look at the 1 to 0, and then we actually determined some of the things on the spacecraft, and these look pretty good. With the ranging that Phil did, they were fine with ephemeris, so we know better where it is. And now we actually we're back, we have this set up with remote into our receiver with the laptop there connected to the ESEE, so you can see what's going on. So this is actually back at the office here. Also, this is Jacob Gold, another member of the Reboot team, and this is my colleague Ian, who happens to be over there. Thanks for all of your help and advice in getting the sounding board. This is actually, remember how we had those beautiful plots at the FFT? This is actually the ASCII art version because we had internet connection issues, so we're making sure that you can see it with ASCII art. Now, one other thing about the spacecraft is that this is a coherent arranging mode, so you can turn it on and then it'll actually track the uplink carrier by moving the downlink carrier to the ratio. And then when you send stuff, it'll act like a bent pipe or an RF megaphone. So whatever it's sending, whatever you send it will actually repeat to you. This is a good way of making sure it works and figuring out exactly what it is. So we've been doing a bit of that as well. So this is a waterfall, and this is the sort of normal rest frequency of the thing. And we send some commands, and you can see that it starts tracking our carrier because we send commands at various frequencies, slowly stepping up. And here you can see that it's actually following that step sequence. So this is really cool because it also means that many other parts of the receiver and transmitter are working on the space program. Here it is again. This is actually, was this today?
Yeah.
No, this is today. So this is kind of cool because it loses lock and then it gets it back again as we continue stepping the commands up. That's the antenna version, just all of the different steps that we went through and how it's tracking. And this is really important because you can use this, look at the step size, and actually derive the Doppler shift from this. There's a bit of maths involved, but then you can compare the derived Doppler from this against what NASA says, and we find that it's actually a bit off, so we need to fix that. And this is another GNU radio app that can send out these tones and detect through the range. We haven't been able to try this yet because we need to write some more code, but that's the process. Alright, so this is the telemetry screen. I've had a couple of sleepless all-nighters lately, but these are the sort of frames that you get as the telemetry stream comes down. So it's a whole bunch of ones and zeros, and there are 128 bytes in this minor frame, and it cycles through 256 of these minor frames to make a major frame that describes everything about the spacecraft. There are also additional subframes in that, analog subframes and digital subframes that are 64 length, and these are slowly built up as you go through each of the different minor frames. This is actually the new telemetry screen now, so you have all this information about the thrusters and firing ratios and so on. We check that the rotor bits come up here, whether certain valves are open, what the tank pressures are, and so on. And I had an all-nighter and I was pretty tired after that, so I was just hanging out. So that's, who recognizes that? No, it's not contact. Oh, no, yes. So we don't want to upload the transmitter. So just to finish up very, very quickly, I have a live demo. If you'll indulge me just for a second. So whenever we hook up an receiver, we record everything. So this is actually a recording playing back of the telemetry coming down. So I'm just going to show you. So you can see here, this is locked onto the carrier, and then I'm going to run the telemetry decoder, and you can see that running here. So it's waiting for the sync, and then it gets the sync, and then it updates all the bytes in that major frame, and you can see it scanning through. If you want to have a look at the subcom frames, if they're built up, it looks like this. So this is as it goes through each minor frame, it builds up each byte in the subcom frame. And then if you want to look at like the command counters and so on, you can see them up there. And the very top one is the current index of the minor frames. Then if you want to look at the thruster data, I don't have enough lines in this screen, so it crashes. But it looks like that screen before we get all the information about the various thrusters you selected and so on. Just one other thing I wanted to show you here. If you wanted to know what the spacecraft was actually doing right now, then we can bring up that script I was telling you about. So it's currently, what's that, 8.3 million kilometers away, moving at 2.5 kilometers per second, and they're the current frequencies that we would need to target to 200. And the last thing I wanted to share with you was, when you run the telemetry, you know how in a lot of the space documentaries they show the CG rendering of the space probe, and they have this sort of little audio track running next to it as if it was sonifying the data. I know we've got a little bit over time, so I guess any quick questions for any of us?
What exactly are you waiting for before doing the thruster burn? You said earlier you had
So the question was, what are we waiting for before we do the thruster burns? Is that about size? Yeah. Well, actually, the thing so far has just been completing the real-time telemetry. So I did an all-nighter on Monday, and then we sort of did a test on Tuesday. There were specific commands that we wanted to send to turn on the attitude control system, and just making sure that the sort of initial steps leading up to that, the spacecraft would execute correctly, and we would see what we expect to see on the telemetry during on it.
Yeah, so we actually need to get permission from NASA because of the way they stole the spacecraft. We currently have permission to spin up the Reaper, and we've done we're getting very close, but we're trying to be thoughtful, and as things come up that we didn't expect, that's kind of just the last couple days, Anyway, we should be on track to do it. We'd like to do it by about July 3rd. Because we've been able to adjust the ephemeris due to the tracking data under SIBO, this sometime in the first half of the year, so we should be all right.
Okay, we've got the audio for you. So actually, in the documentaries, it does sound very similar. So this is actually the ones and zeros coming back from the spacecraft. So it's kind of pretty cool. You can see it in one perspective, you can also hear it in another one. Any other questions?
So you're tracking your only communication is Arecibo, but originally I was tracking one of the locations.
They actually, yes, the question was, we were only tracking from Arecibo. Obviously, there were other tracking stations that were doing this when the satellite was operational. They actually did use Arecibo in 1985 during the continent encounter, just because of how far away it was. They needed data from the size of Arecibo to communicate with it. But NASA runs the Deep Space Network. They have, which Paul mentioned in his presentation, they have 3 major facilities, Southern California, Madrid, and Canada. And they don't have the equipment to talk to it, but they have allowed us to attempt to use their facilities for ranging to the spacecraft. One of the things that's required is that they actually have to send a couple of commands to get it into the right mode for ranging. And if you don't start ranging immediately, it kicks you out of that mode. So, which was not in, it was like a footnote in one document buried somewhere. So, we had to pre-record some commands. They're going to send those up.
Another question over here. Question? No, sorry. Well, the question was what are the bit rates? They're configurable. We can go from 2K down to 16, depending on distances and the quality and so on. Question?
So this seems kind of like a long shot at the beginning. What made you think it was really going to work?
The question was, it's a long shot. What made us thought it would work? I guess. I mean, John and I worked more on later, but also.
So, at the beginning, I didn't really think it was going to work. We decided to just learn as much as we could about the spacecraft, and it wasn't really until these guys came on board that I went, oh yeah, software-defined radio, that makes sense to use for this. But before that, I figured we'd be soldering up a bunch of stuff, and we were, I built a lot of hardware fast. And, there's some teething problems, and things get expensive, and software-defined radios are incredibly nimble.
Will you be accessing these students? I mean, you're on board too?
It's not soon. We just waiting to get the right orbit and so on. The question was, are we going to access the instruments anytime soon? I think we're holding off on that until we're satisfied with everything else. Okay, all right. Just final thing to wrap up. I'll let this go. This is the happy dance when we realised that it was all good. I was sort of checking the wiring and making sure everything was all right because there's that moment of disbelief. Phil now sees it on the scope. Really happy. There's one last question. Question on the back.
I haven't run the numbers, but I think that's incredibly unlikely. It's only about 1.6 meters on 1.6 meters. It would be thinking about it. No, it's going to be pretty far away. I don't know if that's going to happen.
2 more questions will be set for next week.
How does the probe verify you're allowed to give it commands?
I'm sorry?
How does the probe know that you're allowed to give it commands?
There is a procedure which, oh, sorry. The question was, how does the probe verify that you are authorized to give commands? And I don't think I'm really allowed to speak to that. Actually, yeah, so it has solar, it had a battery, the battery failed by 1981, so it's been purely on solar. And the degradation on the solar cells has actually been much better than the models would have suggested. We're getting about 146 watts right now. Big initial life power was 180 something. So yeah, that's the question was, will it die in shadow? And that is a really interesting thing, because we're going to have to do, when we do a lunar flyby, it's going to go into shadow of the moon, it's going to go into eclipse, and that's a problem because it dies in spacecraft. It'll come back up once its power, but because the thrusters are hydrazine monoprop, it can freeze, and if it freezes, you can have problems with it breaking things because it doesn't expand like water doesn't contract, but you can end up having things kind of freeze in one direction, thaw in the other direction, and get pressures that break things, and they did this in testing. So there's a procedure. They had to do this in 1982 after the battery had died, go through eclipse. So there's a procedure that involves getting everything really hot beforehand, and then you go through the shadow, and you're in the shadow for about 20 minutes, and you just try to radiate, not enough heat to allow things to